are halfway there. You've made it to hump day, and we are here to get
Hump
you through
day!
it. It is time.
Yep.
God, I never get tired of that. Caroline Fenton, I'm Jason Fitz. It's Yahoo Sports Daily. I forget we have that hump day every time. Can we get one more time? Can we just get one more hump day? Can we do it?
Hump day!
God,
It always
it's
hits.
just, every
Every single time.
It feels good. You know what? Usually we start every show, Caroline, with 3 points, but not today. Sometimes you have superstar guests, and when you have superstar guests coming on first thing, you bring superstar guests in right away. Curtis Granderson, 3-time MLB All-Star, joining us, studio analyst for MLB on TBS. Curtis, man, we appreciate your time, especially early. We were all up late last night watching playoff baseball. All right, I get it. We were all up late, so we appreciate you hanging out. I'm really interested in your insight straight out of the gate because you, in your career, had 2 trips to the World Series, 06 with the Tigers, 15 with the Mets. When you watch the playoffs, what team stands out to you as a World Series person that's been there that you say, yeah, that team has that it factor that feels like they could get that far?
Well, first off, I got to thank you all because you all starting this segment talking about hump day. I completely forgot it was Wednesday until you opened this segment with that. I was up, I'm like, hump day? It's not it is Wednesday today. So thank you all for that to get this day started. But it was a late day. You know, that's one of the things I've been hearing for a lot of friends and colleagues watching. Like, these games are starting so late. And, I'm not staying up for this. I got to go to work. My kids got to go to school. So definitely something that might need to be addressed. And it's not getting any earlier. I think there's another 9 o'clock Eastern game, either not tonight, if not tomorrow. So definitely makes it challenging to stay up and see what's going to happen, what's happening, or do you just wake up early like we're going to do and try to recap it all? But I think right away, for the first few games in the division series, the big things that jump out at me, I think what Milwaukee has been doing up there, they call it Wrigleyville North because it's only 90 miles away or 90 minutes away from Chicago. There's still so many people that think, okay, the Brewers got hot, they played well, but can they do it in the postseason? We've seen what they've done over the past several years, and I played for the Brewers back in 2018, which was the last time that they had some victories. So I think a lot of people were expecting them to fall off and did not anticipate them coming out and doing the things that they've done all season long by just getting hits and stringing together runs. And game 2 with all those homers, everyone's like, okay, they can do both of those things. So right away today, as we sit here on Hump Day, Wednesday, October 8th, the Milwaukee Brewers are definitely jumping out at me of the remaining teams left in the playoffs.
Curtis, I always say you can sleep when October ends because it's okay if I only get a couple of hours of shut-eye every single night because we've got playoff baseball. We saw the Mariners take a 2-1 lead over the Tigers yesterday, 8-4 win. We also got to see a big dumper home run, which I will never take for granted every time we get to see just a small chapter of history from him. But what do the Tigers need to do to tie this series up and potentially get themselves to the championship series?
Now, on the flip, we talked about the Brewers doing what they did all season long, and they're still doing that in the postseason. The Tigers had done things amazing from 2024 to 2025. They get to the postseason last year, and we knew their pitching staff was amazing, but the offense just wasn't on par to get them longevity through the postseason. Well, in 2025, they addressed that. They hit homers. They hit for average. They took extra bases in addition to all the pitching. So at one point, especially during the All-Star, we thought this was the best team since sliced bread. So they were going to roll. And then next thing you know, they get cold as ice. They can't put it together in September. They just crawl across the finish line. So you go, okay, now you're in. Once you're in, everything resets. Everything is 0-0. Everything is going to show up. The pitching has been there. The defense has been solid, but the offense just hasn't been able to put it together for whatever reason. Do we credit the pitching staff of the Seattle Mariners, which has been amazing all season long, or have the bats just not been able to find their groove? But you have AJ Hinch up right there. AJ talks about just trying to create some chaos, trying to do different things to put pressure on the defense, taking the extra base when you may not anticipating, maybe some hit and runs, maybe some bunt and runs, a couple double steals. So I wouldn't be surprised if they look to do something like that tonight just to get the offense going, because sometimes when you call some of those plays that don't seem traditional, it takes your mindset out of it from a hitting standpoint going, okay, I got to get a big hit here. if I just have to execute a hit and run or a bunt or a steal, it just gets me thinking something different than, okay, I need to come up big here in the postseason. So that's going to need to happen. Of course, they're facing elimination. And I think if they can do those things, we could be in a very interesting, potentially game 5 of that series with Seattle and Detroit.
Okay, Curtis, I did a bad job. All right, because we all know when you talk about baseball nationally, you lead with the Yankees, especially after last night. Like, there was this moment where I'm going to be honest. Like, I was sitting there trying to figure out if I was going to, like, second screen the game because it was 6-1. It was a blowout. I'm like, I'll watch a horror movie. And instead, all I had to do to watch something horrific was watch the rest of that game. Like, the Yankees' comeback was absolutely brilliant in this, particularly Aaron Judge. What did you, as someone that's played so much and seen so much greatness, what did you see last night that stood out to you from somebody that is an MVP candidate?
Well, first, I started to get a little nervous on the outside. Those Yankee fans definitely started to feel it when they started the "Let's Go Blue Jays" chants in Yankee Stadium. You start thinking, okay, are the Blue Jays fans going to come and support, come across the border, or the ones that are in the U.S. going to come out, pay an expensive ticket to potentially see their team sweep the Yankees? And it started to look like it was happening that way. Then all of a sudden, you have a chance for a big moment with Aaron Judge. Can he deliver in the postseason? And the thing is, he's been delivering. Yeah, there are some times where he's not going to get it done every time, but he's up there in homer ranks for the Yankees historically in the postseason. He had 10 hits in this postseason so far before that big moment. Now he's just kind of kept the door open because their season remains all because of one big swing of the bat from the potential MVP candidate, from the Judge, from somebody that has a section in Yankee Stadium that is dedicated to him in the fans in the seating area in right field. So it's a definite amazing moment. It keeps things going over there. Derek Jeter on their cast with Fox talked about if you can just win one, then that continues to give you a lot of optimism and chances. And we forget about that. Everyone goes, okay, they got to win 3 in a row. Well, you can't win 3 until you win one. And now they've won one. And now a lot of that pressure shifts back to Toronto. But in this series, you have to give credit where credit's due. Each team has won at home, which is what you're supposed to do. So can the Yankees keep that going and win another game at home in Yankee Stadium? They got some momentum. Those bats need to come alive. But the pitching has to find a way to get Vlad Jr. out. This is the hottest man on the planet.
Who carries, though, more momentum? Because you talk about momentum from this win, and we all see the stat here. First team in MLB postseason history down by 5 or more runs and in danger of being swept to come back and win. So in a situation like that from the guys in the locker room, do you carry more momentum because you did the impossible, or do you carry more momentum weirdly if you're Toronto and you say, guys, we had them. Like, we were the better team throughout the majority of that game?
I feel like it's not as extreme, like one team has all of it and the other team doesn't have any of it. Because if you are the Blue Jays, you have to look and say, we got on top early. We scored runs in Yankee Stadium. We did runs when we were at home at the Rogers Center. They just happened to come back and get to our bullpen, which was a question mark towards the end of the season for the Blue Jays. However, the pressure can easily shift if the Yankees get on top early in game 4. I think that's going to be the key. Coming from behind again, it's hard to keep doing that. They've gotten down early in game 1 and game 2, and you saw they couldn't get all the way back in it. But they didn't stop fighting. Those games at one point, I think, were big blowouts and ended up being a little bit closer, still resulting in a loss. But that fight towards the end in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th are little victories, which I think help in game 3. Hey, we're down. Just keep fighting. Keep getting runners on base. Keep putting the ball in play, and hopefully we'll get that one big swing, and they got it. But if they jump out early in game 4, I think now all of a sudden it shifts from about a 60-40 pressure Yankee Blue Jay to about a 70 on the Yankee side, a 30 on the Blue Jay side.
And of course, the Yankees are feeling the momentum. You know, when the captain, Aaron Judge, comes up with a performance like he did yesterday, but also maybe feeling a little bit of swagger, knowing who will be on the mound tonight for the Yankees. Cam Schlittler, the Massachusetts kid that knocked his hometown team out of the postseason with an absolute nails performance last time that we saw him. How big of a difference can Cam Schlittler make, and what have you observed from him?
Young arms, optimism, the moments that they've dreamt about as a little kid, and finally being on the big stage to let them know I belong. You saw it in the Red Sox series. Stepped up, looked cool as a cucumber, wasn't even breathing hard, didn't even look like he was sweating out there. So to do that against a historic rival of the Red Sox, growing up a Red Sox fan, was huge. Now the biggest moment gets even upped in an elimination game, but the good thing for him, it's in Yankee Stadium where he did it in the previous game. The fans are going to feel it. The fans are going to know about it. The bad thing for the Blue Jays is it's someone they haven't had a chance to see a ton. When you've seen hitters a lot like Vlad Jr. versus Rodon, who's got history against him, who's had success against him, those are things you can use to your advantage. When you haven't necessarily seen somebody all the time, you're trying to figure as you go. And figuring as you go in October is a challenging situation because you're not going to get a lot of at-bats. You're not going to have a ton of information. Each situation is going to slightly be different. But again, you talk about adding a little momentum. I said it was 60-40, but until you brought that one up again, I'm going to go 65-35 now. It just slightly shifted again because of the performance that he was able to put on last time.
Let's take a look at the National League. We got two teams that are down in 0-2 hole. Cubs or Phillies? Which one do you give a better chance of making the big comeback?
I think right now, as today, I think the Cubs have the chance of winning Game 3 better than the Phillies do winning Game 3 in Dodger Stadium. Now, again, that's just a slight because the Phillies did go to the Dodgers late in the season and secured their division victory win over there. They had a late inning come from behind victory against Ohtani in Game 2 of that series in September. So they've had some success in LA, but to travel from Philly after losing 2 games, the way they've lost them, to go all the way a 5.5, maybe 6-hour flight if they didn't get delayed or hit any weather and go to LA and try to win one there is going to be challenging. Now, we talked about it earlier. They called the Milwaukee, Wrigley North because it's so close. So a lot of those Cubs fans had gone up there, and they're obviously going to be excited for their team to come back to Wrigley Field, historic stadium, and get those fans behind them out there in the fans, get the beer snakes going, start getting the hot dogs and the Chicago-style pizza flowing and rolling, those Miller Lights, and try to get as wild and as crazy as you can because you're going to need it. The Brewers fans also will come down. They're going to have a presence at Wrigley Field as well. But I think at home, at Wrigley, where they have played so well, gives them a little bit of a chance to pick up Game 3 over the Phillies, trying to pick up and extend the series in LA.
It's not one of the most iconic venues in sports for no reason. All right, Curtis, I am going to allow you to just be a little self-indulgent. Please, by all means, we invite it wholeheartedly. Who in the postseason reminds you most of you?
Haha. Let's see. The most of me, I would say, wow, if I'm looking at these teams, I gotta think real quick. Um, I would say probably Kristen Yelich. Kristen Yelich is somebody that doesn't say a ton, but can amp his team up, can bring a presence, can lead by example, and you're not going to see it so much on the field. It's in the dugout, it's in the locker room before you step on the field to allow the teammates to go out there and do what they can. He's been there. He's been to the postseason. He's continued to perform through injuries. He's continued to just be a namesake over there with that organization and with that team ever since he joined them. He's had big seasons where he's hit 40-plus home runs, and he's also been able to adapt to this role where, hey, I'm just trying to get through and give you everything I can. And even from that, hopefully you will see that and be able to do the same thing. We saw that with Shedeur dealing with a hamstring injury. Hey, if Kristen Yelich can go out there and do the things he's been doing all season long and after he did last year, I can go out there and give my team everything I got, possibly with only one hamstring. And you saw that massive homer he hit and smacked the batter's eye in Game 2 after being questionable for that game. So Kristen Yelich, he is taller than me, and he's got more hair than me, but he's the one that reminds me the most of me because he's on the left side, and of course he plays in the outfield.
He does
Yeah,
have great hair.
everybody's taller than both Caroline and I too. Let's just acknowledge that. All right, before we get you out of here, we're gonna let you give the answer to a test that's already halfway through. Your World Series pick. I mean, now that you've seen some playoff baseball, who you got?
So I got to stay with what I picked early on. I got asked this question in February, and I was like, hey, this is way too early, but let me just throw it out there. And the reason I got to stay with it, both teams are still alive. It's going to be a challenge for them, but let's see what ends up happening. And I had Detroit versus Milwaukee in the World Series. Just throwing it out there. I didn't know what I was doing back in February, but I did like what I had seen, and they are still alive. So I have those two in them, and I did a piece where I had to pick between those two. And I said, for the first time in their team's history, you will see some cheese curds, you will see some brats, and you will see a lot of beer being spilled over that trophy as the Brewers bring it home as the 2025 World Series champs.
Ooh, that is good stuff. You guys can check him out, MLB on TBS. I don't know what's better. Getting to watch you play was an honor. Getting to watch you talk about the sport just gets me amped up, brother. Either way, it works so well for us. We appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out with us. I hope your pick is right, just so that we can all get squeaky cheese curds and be happy.
We'll see. You never know what's going to happen. And as you mentioned, it's October. That's what makes it so fun and exciting. We just got to stay up and see what happens. So get your nap in. I'm going to get a nap in today.
Heck yeah, you deserve it. He deserves it. We all deserve it. I'll take those late nights if it means we get playoff baseball. Great stuff from Curtis Granderson joining us, and appreciate your time, my friend. All right, from
Thanks,
what
Curtis.
we saw last night to what we're going to see this weekend, Joe Flacco got traded yesterday in a move that shocked everybody. What's it actually mean now for the Bengals? We'll tell you next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Look, we disrupted things a little bit at the beginning of the show because Curtis Granderson's an absolute rock star and wanted to talk Major League Baseball. Amazing, and we appreciate his time. But now, a little bit later than usual, Caroline, let's get to some 3 points. What is on your mind, my friend?
Oh man, what is not on my mind in Chapel Hill? Whole lot going on with the Tar Heels football program. So it was originally announced in August that UNC would be the center of a docuseries on Hulu that provided behind the scenes insight into Bill Belichick's journey in his first year at North Carolina, right? And I think it was something that all college sports fans wanted to sign up for. Not only is it just crazy that Bill Belichick is in college football, but there were so many things that made North Carolina football appointment watching. So we were all excited to see a camera crew following around the team, providing a deep dive into the program. But it was announced yesterday that that docuseries is no longer. That docuseries about the North Carolina football program is dead. And how convenient. How convenient is it that a docuseries that was going to pretty much air all of your dirty laundry is no longer after you start the season 2-3, after you've gotten outscored by power conference opponents 120-33, after you've really kind of become one of the laughingstocks of college football, after several commentators have accused players of not playing 100% and not giving it their all. How convenient is it that you no longer have to show the insights of your program? How disingenuous is that? Like, really? How cowardly can you be that Bill Belichick can record a video about how excited he is to share with the world what they've been doing behind the scenes, how excited he is for these players to get an opportunity to show off the hard work that they've been doing and to really showcase their personalities, that now you don't want to do that anymore because you are losing. Now you don't want to give people that insight because any more insight might just make you even more of a laughingstock as you've already been. And this is just one of many things that have made Bill Belichick's running of this program prove to be close to incompetent. Not tweeting out Patriots content to the UNC football account, not allowing New England Patriots scouts to come into the building, the Jordan Hudson of it all, the off-season interviews that she's essentially been dictating, the emails that she's been posting on social media. All of this has just pointed to Bill Belichick not being able to run a competent football program. And then you add on top of that, the parents of the UNC players have weighed in about how Bill Belichick has run his program. There's a parent of a current UNC player in the program that said, quote, "It's all starting at the top. It's toxic and the boys are being affected. I don't fault the players. I fault the leadership that created this toxic environment." Toxic is an incredibly strong word. Toxic. Bill Belichick. We're talking about Bill Belichick, the man that won 6 Super Bowls in New England, the program builder, the culture cultivator. Bill Belichick, the creator of the Patriot Way, the way that was what every NFL program and NFL team wanted to copy. The Patriot Way, the foundation and the culture for all of those great years with Tom Brady and all of those Super Bowls. But the sad thing is, I believe it. I do believe that behind closed doors, there probably is a whole lot of toxicity going on because we can see it seeping through. Whether it's the docuseries that is no longer, whether it's not allowing Robert Kraft or any Patriots employee in Chapel Hill or not retweeting New England Patriot content to the Twitter account. All of these things I think are just peeks behind the curtain that, yes, what's going on at North Carolina is toxic. Shame on Bill Belichick for allowing this to happen. Bill Belichick knows better. We all know he knows better. And shame on North Carolina for letting this happen. Shame on North Carolina for allowing this to happen. And what comes next of it? Well, that's up to North Carolina of how much they want to maintain the respect of this football program. Because one of the most respectable college coaches of all time isn't respecting this football program the way a coach should and the way that we expected Bill Belichick to.
Beautifully said by you, and let's see, because winning is the one thing that cures it all. How much winning will there have to be for everybody to feel better about North Carolina? I don't think we'll get that answer anytime soon. All right, I'll get to my point. My point comes in the form of Jerry Jones out here letting his feelings be known emotionally as he reacted to the New York Jet fans during the Cowboys' massive win. Now, you see right there, he was fined $250,000 for the self-described unfortunate gesture he made Sunday to fans at MetLife. Now, fined $250,000 for flipping off fans. He has said it was an unfortunate accident. He meant to give him a thumbs up, and instead he gave him the middle finger. Number one, I don't know how I feel about a team owner that can't figure out the difference between flipping somebody off and giving them a thumbs up. Just ask yourself the next time you're pulled over in a traffic accident how much of a difference there is between a thumbs up and the other one. It seems like they're pretty drastic in the way they'll be perceived. But if you think $250,000 fine is hefty, It isn't. In fact, I had my research assistant, also known as ChatGPT, look this up for me. According to the Google machine, the estimated net worth of Jerry Jones right now is $16.6 billion. He was fined $250,000. What equivalent is that to you? If you make $60,000 a year, the amount that he was just fined is equivalent to 90 cents. 90 cents. So, frankly, Jerry, the next time you're going to flip somebody off, use both middle fingers. Go for $500,000. That's the equivalent of $2. Why not even up to a cup of coffee? Just do it over and over and over again and see how many times you have to be fined before it even reaches the equivalent to most of us for going to Starbucks. This is why when you hear that a league owner in any league is fined, laugh about it. Just laugh about the dollar amount, because Jerry Jones is going to earn more in interest on his accounts today than he was fined by the NFL for flipping off fans. I don't know if it's really that big of a deal. I don't know if I really care that he flipped off fans, but if the league cares enough to fine him, at least care enough to fine him enough that it actually hurts his wallet, not fine him so little that he laughs about it. Just a reminder, $250,000 to Jerry Jones is about the equivalent to the amount of change that accidentally falls out of your pocket into your couch cushions that you find one night in the middle of the night when you're finally cleaning your sofa. That's how much he was fined. So if the NFL thinks it's a big deal, they certainly didn't send that message to Jerry Jones in any real or palpable way. Let's get to our top point. Big news yesterday. Joe Flacco traded to the Bengals. This is huge for Cincinnati, huge for the Browns. Or is it? Caroline, I think the expectation is that Joe Flacco is going to start this weekend for the Bengals. He's already played the Packers once this year. He'll have the chance to beat them twice. Nobody has ever done that since I think it was 73 or whatever. It's been forever since a quarterback on two different teams beat the same team in the course of a year. All that to be said, he's prepared for this, but let's be honest. That offensive line for Cincinnati is so bad that it got Joe Burrow killed, and Joe Burrow is actually mobile. You're putting like 432-year-old immobile Joe Flacco statue back there, and you think it's going to work better? I just don't think there's a lot of value in this for where the Bengals are headed. I'm not hearing Caroline. I think Caroline is muted. I'm not hearing Caroline, but we'll get that worked out quickly as we figure out what's going on with Caroline's microphone. But I think the other part of this conversation, and the one that also becomes wildly interesting to everybody, is what's it mean for the Browns? And certainly when you're trying to figure out what it means for the Browns, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So at some point, what we have to look at is what are they going to do with their quarterback situation? Now, I heard Kimberly Martin at ESPN mention the fact that it is still on the table that Bailey Zappi, currently on the practice squad, could become the backup for the Browns this weekend instead of Shedeur. And before you react to that emotionally, understand the logic behind it is that, Bailey has played a little bit of professional football. Obviously, he's been in some games. And then the other part of it is you get such limited snaps. Is it the best situation to put Shedeur in where he's cold, hasn't played much, and then suddenly comes in at the end of a game? Maybe it would be better if long-term they want to see Shedeur, if they let Shedeur actually get the starting opportunity, get a week of reps as the starter. All of this is the logic goes behind it. So I just want to remind everybody that Flacco out the door doesn't suddenly simplify what people expect over the next 5-6 days at the Browns quarterback position, Caroline.
Yeah, with the Browns quarterback position, I think there's two kind of stories here. Joe Flacco to the Bengals, and I can start with that one. That, poor Joe Flacco cannot catch a break with these offensive lines. I mean, somebody, please, this is elder abuse at some point. Like, protect the man, block for the man. Does Joe Flacco make the Bengals better? Honestly, as awful as Joe Flacco has been, maybe, because that's how bad the Bengals have been. The Bengals under Jake Browning have been outscored 113-37 over the last 3 weeks, Fitz. Do I think it makes enough of a difference to keep the Bengals in this thing until Joe Burrow gets back and gets healthy? No, I really don't. It just kind of, frankly, it was a 6th-round pick and in exchange for a 5th-round pick, and Joe Flacco, whatever it was, some odd pick swap, and then sending Joe Flacco to Cincinnati. It feels like a waste to me because I don't think Joe Flacco can do enough to make a difference for this football team. But for the Brown side of things, because anytime there is any sort of transaction or move or, knock on wood, injury in the Cleveland Browns quarterback room, it's going to bring up conversation about Shedeur Sanders. In theory, does this mean that Shedeur Sanders is closer to getting in-game reps? Sure. In theory, if you think of it that way, that Joe Flacco is out, everybody gets moved up one, Dillon Gabriel is one, that would mean, okay, Shedeur Sanders is probably two. But as you very smartly point out, that doesn't necessarily mean that Shedeur Sanders is going to be slated in that QB2 spot. If the Browns thought that Shedeur Sanders, with Joe Flacco in the room, was the third quarterback in the room, maybe they still view Shedeur Sanders in that way, because it's not like it's just those two rookie quarterbacks in that room. That if I'm the Browns, and let's say, again, knock on wood, Dillon Gabriel goes down with an injury, do you want to bring in Shedeur Sanders, let's say, in a late tight game situation with him getting his first reps in the National Football League? I don't really know how fair that is to put Shedeur Sanders or any young rookie quarterback, fifth round quarterback in that position and expect him to will you to victory. So I do think it'll be fascinating to see what happens below Dillon Gabriel, what happens, with whether it's, Shedeur Sanders or any other young quarterback in that room. But I do hope that we see Shedeur Sanders in some in-game reps to see what he does with that opportunity. But frankly, Fitz, I don't want to, / I don't need to see it in a situation where, you're down 2 minutes on the clock, go get us a victory, Shedeur Sanders. That's not fair to anyone.
I also think the concept that they need to see Shedeur in games presumes that coaches don't see him every day in practice. And I'm just going to continue to yell about practice over and over and over again. Like, there's a shot here that Dillon Gabriel plays well enough for the rest of the year that Shedeur never gets on the field. That should be part of what the Browns organization and Browns fans hope. Your hope is you find a quarterback. Well, you got one to play pretty well in 1 week. What if he just plays pretty well the rest of the year and that doesn't really carve open an opportunity to make a change just to make a change? But the other part of this is we continually say they need to see him in games. Again, I will answer the rest of that statement. They need to see him in games when they think he's ready to succeed in games. If they drafted him with the intent that they wanted to take this season to develop him into the best quarterback that they can and work on things behind the scenes, if that was their development plan, you don't change that just because suddenly fans are clamoring even louder to see him. You have to remain true to what you believe is the right development plan for Shedeur Sanders. If Kevin Stefanski and the Browns believed over the summer that the right plan, the best plan for Shedeur was that he doesn't even step on the field this year, but he gets so much this year out of that opportunity that next year he can compete to start. If they believe that's the case, who am I to suddenly tell them that that's just stupid simply because I'm not happy with the results I'm getting at the quarterback position? I just think that's the failed part about the analysis consistently on Shedeur. Maybe what's best for Shedeur is actually maintaining a development plan that the coaches already had for him in place that makes him the best quarterback long-term, not just the quarterback we see on Sunday.
The commentary can be unfair about Shedeur, because if Shedeur Sanders is, let's say, sticks in that QB3 position and the Browns decide to go elsewhere as the backup, everyone is going to scream about how Shedeur Sanders isn't getting a fair shake at an opportunity in the National Football League, which maybe that's not the case. Maybe the Browns are trying to protect Shedeur Sanders. Maybe the Browns want to make sure that Shedeur Sanders can continue his development behind the scenes before he gets live in-game reps. We cannot, as a football society, do both things at once. We cannot yell at coaches and owners and general managers that rush the development of young quarterbacks and put them out there before they're ready, a la Anthony Richardson, and then at the same time criticize an organization for doing exactly that, allowing a player to sit and develop on the bench. We cannot do two things at once.
Yeah, I can't imagine how the world would have reacted if Jordan Love had the same scrutiny from the minute he was drafted. And it looks like sitting for 3 years actually really helped Jordan Love be the best version of himself. So maybe Kevin Stefanski,
crazy how that works.
Maybe Kevin Stefanski knows more about quarterback development than the fat guy sitting on their couch that's tweeting about it the whole time. All right, the Browns may stink. They're not the only team in the NFL that stinks. There are a bunch of bad teams in the NFL. Why? We'll answer that next. 8 NFL teams have one win or fewer entering week 6. It's a dumpster fire out there. And in a world where we love everything from the NFL, maybe it's time to have honest conversations about the lack of parity in the league. Yahoo Sports Daily, Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. And look, I want to stress this. I went back and looked it up to make sure that I didn't have the math wrong in my head because, I'm pretty not smart. Last year, a dozen teams in the NFL, 12 teams in the NFL, finished the season with double-digit losses. That means a dozen teams of more than a third of the league finished with a record of 7-10 or worse. And so we see this as we see the bad teams in the league are very bad this year. I don't think this is new. I think everybody is seeing it this year. And what's happening, Caroline, is we're forgetting that last year there were a bunch of bad football teams too. Remember the end of the year when we were getting ready for the draft and everybody's trying to lose one more game so they could be at the top of the heap. And we were watching 5 or 6 teams try and compete for the opportunity to be a 3-win football team. Like it's just the modern NFL has a handful of teams that might be really good, especially this year, and a bunch of teams that clearly suck.
And it happens every year. And it is, the NFL is constructed for every team to be 8 and 9 and 9 and 8. That's what the NFL wants. The NFL wants everyone to be at 500. That's why the worst team gets the best pick, so on and so forth. But that's obviously not how it works. Every team is on a different development. Every young quarterback is on a different development. Coaches can stick around. If you have the Mike Tomlins and the John Harbaughs that have been around forever, and then you have the organizations that have a turnstile at the head coaching position. So yes, that's what the NFL wants, but we obviously know that at every team that each, all 32 teams have completely different stories and paths to get to where they are. The question is why? And in a league that is constructed for every team to be 500, how do we have 2 complete polar opposites? How in the world do we live in a league that's constructed for every team to be 500, have the Lions and the Buffalo Bills, and then the Jets and the Titans? How does that happen? I think that you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think I look at it, and there's so many different stories, and it starts at the top. It starts at not just coaching and not just general managers. It starts at ownership that are making decisions. That if you look across the league, you can look at owners that are, fairly hands-off, that supply the resources to get good players, to find good coaches, to move off of players when things aren't working, to upgrade facilities, to make sure that travel is top-notch, that families are taken care of. That doesn't always equal wins necessarily, but you can look at some teams that have sustained success. The Eagles, the Ravens, those are all teams that are viewed to have very good quality ownership. When there are some organizations with owners that like to butt in a little bit too much, that might say, hey, GM, coach, that have dedicated your lives to watching film and developing players, let's hurry up and start the young rookie quarterback before they're ready because I have tickets to sell. So I think that it does start ultimately at the top with ownership, and owners that want their voices to be heard or don't give enough resources for clubs to be successful. Funny that I'm saying don't give enough resources for clubs to be successful. And this guy comes across our screen.
I mean, there is just this element of, if you look at Mark Davis right there. Mark Davis, to your point, has built a juggernaut for the WNBA. He's built a juggernaut for the WNBA. Yeah. Why? Because that's easy to do compared. Like, all you have to do, like Mark Davis was able to go out and for $1 million get the best coach in the league, according to many, right? Mark Davis was able, for a moderate amount of money, to build one of the best training facilities in a relatively new arena, and then it doesn't cost near as much to get the best players in the world in the WNBA as it does in the NFL. The problem is it's just more complicated in the NFL. When we look at Mark Davis, it's just another example of throwing spaghetti against a wall to see what sticks, which is what so many owners do. There's a drastic similarity to me between what Mark Davis has done and, for example, what James Dillon has done as the owner of the Knicks year in and year out, where, hey, you want me to be hands-on, I'm hands-on. Then everybody says be hands-off, so I'll hire a big name. And then that big name doesn't work. And it's just this constant process. What do you do when the people that run your franchise, I ask this all the time, are just incapable of identifying talent? And that's the problem. Like, no matter what happens with the Raiders or the Titans or the Browns, or just go through the list of the Panthers, the bad football teams in the NFL, well, no matter what happens, if you're asking for a rebuild, it's going to be the same person in charge of the rebuild. So the person that keeps getting it wrong is going to be asked to get it right this time. And I don't know how you do that. I think part of the problem here is that you have business people that have had a ton of success that, just don't know that much about football. So they're grasping at straws to figure out how to build a good football organization underneath it. And they're not identifying talent well. And that just, Caroline, that just doesn't solve itself.
No. And I think that's the worst position to be in as a sports fan, is to be swimming in the sea of suck and to have bad ownership, because you can fire a general manager, you can fire a head coach, you can move off of a bad quarterback, you can be one draft away from, being miserable to being optimistic. Look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, for a very long time, the Jags were just kind of irrelevant, kind of a miserable franchise. And then I'm seeing videos of them, celebrating in the locker room after beating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And that is, a couple of drafts strung together in the right hire in Liam Cohen. And of course, it is very early. We're in the infancy of the Liam Cohen era in Jacksonville. But I think so far, so good. You can feel fairly optimistic with the Jacksonville Jaguars that you can have that optimism as a sports fan that you might just be one good hire or one good draft away from being competitive. But if you have a bad owner that has a history of making questionable decisions, not having a clear vision for leadership, firing coaches prematurely or sticking with bad coaches too long, then it's so hard to find that glimmer of hope of what can come next, of digging yourself out of being in the sea of suck. Because if it's bad leadership from the top, if it's an owner that wants to be heard, like I think the Dallas Cowboys might be in this kind of position, right? Where you have obviously a very unique situation in Jerry Jones, but you have an owner who is also the general manager, an owner that also has weekly radio hits, an owner that pays attention to the headlines and likes being the topic of conversation, positively or negatively. There's no such thing as bad publicity for the Dallas Cowboys. There might be a sense of just frustration for Cowboys fans knowing that the person in charge doesn't have, the GM, the person that's calling the shots, doesn't have any accountability, because the person that normally holds GMs accountable is that same person, is the person that doesn't have any interest in stepping away from decision making. And that is just one example of, unique ownership structures in the National Football League that can lead you to, very little optimism for what can come next.
At the end of the day, I just think we've been sold a bill of goods that makes everybody think that teams are constantly competitive, and they aren't. And I pulled the numbers here over the last decade. Only 5 franchises in the entire NFL have averaged double-digit wins over the last decade. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Packers. That's it. If you want to go to
what do those teams have in common?
Yeah, 100. I mean, you would think
historically good
structure,
ownership,
right,
or no owner at all for the Packers.
But then if you go, as you said, the league is built for every team to go 8, let's say 8-8, the old math. If you look at the last decade, for where we are, if you look in the last decade, only 14 teams in the NFL, less than half, have actually averaged 8 or more wins a year. The concept that the NFL is actually built for everybody to be competitive is one of the greatest modern sports lies we've ever been told, and we buy into it every single year. All right, we're going to get some insights on what's going on right now from a great insider. Jordan Schultz going to join us next. We'll get his thoughts on what's going on in Cleveland and everywhere else across the league coming up next. Yahoo Sports Daily. For Browns rookie Shedeur Sanders, everyone has something to say, whether he opens his mouth or not. That's just the reality. I personally have no problem with him. What people should be talking about is the Browns' overall draft class and how impressive it's been. That tweet came from Jordan Schultz of the Schultz Report, NFL insider and a host of the Schultz Report. Jordan joins us right now, brother. We appreciate your time. Thanks for hanging out with us. You tweeted that Browns observation, which, by the way, you're right, 1,000%. That entire rookie class looks great. Now that we know that Flacco's been traded, how does Shedeur impact any of this conversation?
He'll be the quarterback too, Jason. He'll have an opportunity to back him up, Dillon Gabriel, and really learn the system. And I think one of the things that was lost throughout the draft conversation with Shedeur was that he's a football savant. And one of the things that I'm interested in, most definitely as a football fan, first and foremost, is when he gets the opportunity. I don't know when that's going to be. I know they're pretty committed to Gabriel right now. He looked good, certainly last week. But when Shedeur gets the opportunity, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with how NFL ready he is from a mental standpoint. And what I mean by that is when you talk to evaluators throughout the pre-draft process, even the guys that weren't convinced that Shedeur is going to be a bona fide starting quarterback, the thing you kept hearing was how smart he was, how much being around and entrenched in football his whole life has paid off. So at some point he will get the opportunity. I don't know if it's this season, but at some point he will.
So sticking on the Browns quarterback room, we are about a year removed from Deshaun Watson's Achilles tear. Where does he fit in this Browns quarterback discussion?
I think with Deshaun, he's obviously been injured a ton, and he's had a series of significant injuries. So right now, I would say the organization is pretty committed to Dillon Gabriel in the sense that they drafted him in the 3rd round. And what they like about him is that he plays on time, he plays in the pocket, and he's got a very, very quick release, quick trigger. And one of the things that people said about Dillon Gabriel coming out was he can overcome maybe some of the physical limitations because of what he does, because of how quick his release is, because of how much he anticipates as a thrower. And going back to your question about Deshaun, I don't obviously see him playing this season there. They have an opportunity after this season to potentially move on. I don't know if they will, but right now I would say the organization is pretty committed to Gabriel, and at some point, I think Sanders will get an opportunity again. I just don't know when.
That's what's interesting to me, Jordan. Before we move on to there are other things going on in the NFL, but let's be honest for a second. Like the easy answers here: Dillon goes out, sucks. Easy answer. Dillon goes out and is epic, looks like a Hall of Famer. Easy answer. What if Dillon just comes out and plays pretty well? Like at some point, does Dillon playing pretty well just justify keeping him in and not taking a look at Shedeur? Or is there some sort of like line in the sand for what the Browns are looking for?
The Browns are in a really interesting position in that I think they felt and hoped, Jason, that they would be competitive this season. And you talked about the rookies. They really hit on Mason Graham from Michigan. They really hit on Quinshon Judkins, and they really hit on Harold Fannin. A lot of these rookies are contributing and playing already. At some point, if you're Kevin Stefanski, who's a former coach of the year, you have to be competitive and start winning games. We did not see that last season, obviously. We have not seen that so far this season, with the exception of the Green Bay game. And I don't know what's going to happen with Gabriel. I think it's pretty realistic to assume he plays adequately enough to retain that job throughout most of the season, if not all. Them trading Joe Flacco also tells us that, they feel pretty good about where Shedeur Sanders is at as the backup, because obviously in the game last weekend, he was the 3. They trade Flacco. Now he's the 2. That has to signify to us as Browns fans, or in addition to Browns fans, that they feel pretty good about him. I can tell you, too, that throughout training camp, one of the things that stood out with Shedeur was, again, how intelligent and how quick he was to learn the playbook. And we talk a lot about the Browns defense and Jim Schwartz, and as good as that defense is, it's not a very complicated defense. There's a lot that goes in to the Kevin Stefanski offense, and Shedeur is going to learn that and probably faster than most rookies. So I would love to see him selfishly, just as a football fan, sooner than later. But if Dillon Gabriel continues to play well or adequate, it's going to be his job.
So Joe Flacco to Cincinnati, one of the first pins of the trade deadline chaos to fall. So what comes next? Look at the Chargers. Rashawn Slater gets hurt in training camp. Joe Alt's banged up. Najee Harris gets the Achilles tear. Now Omarion Hampton is on IR. And this is a Chargers team that wants to run the football. So who could potentially be on the market for the Chargers to trade for at the running back position?
So they signed Nyheim Hines yesterday. They have Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins. What they'll do this week is they'll see exactly how those guys look. And they also, you mentioned the offensive line, they've been decimated from an offensive line standpoint. As well as Hampton had played before the injury, a lot of that was on him because the injuries to the offensive line, Slater and Alt, have been really catastrophic. And it's also a team that looked a lot different the last 2 weeks than they did the first 3 weeks. Running back, fortunately, is one of the easier positions. If you need a running back, you can usually go out and get a running back. And I don't know who it's going to be. And I think they would like to stay in-house with the two they have. And then Hines, I think they would like to weather the storm. If they don't, they'll absolutely go out and try to get someone. But I'm not there yet to say, oh, this guy's available, this guy's available. For example, you saw a lot of Breece Hall trade rumors in the offseason. Breece Hall is not getting traded. And also the other thing, too, is if you're the Chargers, you're going to have to figure out how much you'd want to give up for a temporary, running back, because you have a terrific young one in Omarion Hampton, who we hope is back in a month.
All right, so let's look at the Cowboys then. They traded away Micah. Now they need help on the defensive side of the ball. Would you be surprised to see Jerry try and do something at the trade deadline, like a Trey Hendrickson or anybody else, to try and come in and help this defense?
I don't think it'd be Hendrickson, Jason. And as bad as that defense has played, they did look a lot better against the Jets. They'd still need another pass rusher. And there's a lot of onus right now, a lot of pressure on Matt Eberflus, the defensive coordinator. And you talk about Jerry Jones and how much he runs the show and how excited he is about 2-2-1. You saw his gesture at the Jets game. I don't know what that was. He said it was misinterpreted. The Cowboys, to me, would be a good candidate at some point here in the next 2-3 weeks to potentially make a move for a pass rusher. I don't think it's Trey Hendrickson. It wouldn't be someone of that stature or someone who's getting paid that much money. But the Cowboys certainly could be in the mix. I think Washington's another team that could potentially go out and get a pass rusher. This is the stretch of the season now, especially with the trade deadline being moved a week back, where you could start to see a lot of action. We've already seen a couple trades this week. Baltimore traded a pass rusher to the Chargers. There will be more action. You just need to see which teams are essentially willing to move on from one, and also which teams are going to be competitive or not competitive enough to make a decision, with the trade.
And the Cowboys defense needs some help badly, very badly. Let's focus on. It's rough. It's rough, but let's glass half full this thing. Let's talk about a good defense. The Jags defense, which to me kind of came out of nowhere as one of the best units in the National Football League, has the league, the national media, sports fans as a whole finally caught on to how good the Jags are?
I don't know. I don't think people have. I don't think people realize how good they are.
Are you fully buying into it?
I am. Because okay, so they're 4-1. It's not just the record. It's the fact that, first of all, Trevor Lawrence, we've been waiting for so long to see him morph into whatever it is we thought he would be coming out of Clemson, and we kept hearing generational quarterback, the guy's a superstar. And he's had a lot of ups, he's had downs, but now he gets Liam Cohen, and that's the key. Liam Cohen did wonders for Will Levis at Kentucky. He did a lot with Baker Mayfield at Tampa, and now he's doing the same thing for Trevor Lawrence. But defensively, I think we all knew this would be a top 5, top 10 unit. We had Eric Armstead on our show last week, their standout defensive tackle. And one of the things that he said that struck me was we have a lot of young dudes in this locker room, but he didn't mean players. He was saying first-year head coach, first-year DC, first-year OC, first-year general manager. All of that creates hunger. So Jacksonville I think they're a very good team. The crazy thing to me is that they still haven't really gotten Travis Hunter or Brian Thomas Jr. going. When that happens, that team to me is going to be a real threat in the AFC. I know they beat the Chiefs. I still think the Chiefs are the team to beat. Call me crazy, but until you really knock them off, there's a long season. But what they've done, Jacksonville, is really impressive. But to answer your question, I still don't think people are giving them enough credit.
People need to give you more credit, brother. Check out the Schultz report, obviously. And then my favorite pod right now. Why is Draymond Green talking about football with Jordan Schultz? I love that. Just the name of it is perfect. Before we get you out of here, better podcaster or better basketball player this year? Draymond Green, come on.
Better basketball player for sure.
Sure. It's going to be a big year for him. You're going to have to work your shooting schedule around the Warriors.
Yeah, I know. And we had a joke the other night because they had a preseason game and he couldn't record. And I said, Dre, you're so old now that you should probably take the night off anyway. I will tell you this, Jason. He does know some football. He does know some football. He's a big Steelers fan. He's a big Steelers fan, even though he's from Michigan. And he's convinced that they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'm curious what you guys think of that.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to tell Draymond he's wrong, but you can tell Draymond he's wrong on our behalf. We'll just do it that way.
Everybody needs a little bit of hope,
Yeah,
not just have blind optimism.
I get it. He's not getting a lot of hope right now from Michigan State. So, you get the hope. Michigan State football not really giving Draymond what he wants there.
No.
So, one step at a time. Jordan, man, we appreciate your time. We got to have you back on soon, man. Thank you so much.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Check out the Schultz report. Always love hanging out with you, bud.
Thank you too, buddy. All right, take care.
Thanks, Jordan.
Great stuff from Jordan. All right. Speaking of college football, who's going to win the Heisman? We will figure it out for you next. You need our help. Trust me. We're going to break it down. Yahoo Sports Daily. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. You see right there the Heisman odds via BetMGM. Carson Beck, the current favorite, 5-1. Dante Moore 7-1, Jeremiah Smith 8-1, Ty Simpson 8-1, Fernando Mendoza 1,300-1. So the odds looking much different today than they did before the season started. Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. Let's figure it out, Caroline, because this has been a very weird year so far in college football. And given how much that we've been trying to figure out who's good and who's bad and who sucks and who doesn't, give it to me. Who do you have? Who would be your Heisman guy right now?
Just like we all expected it, though, Ohio State quarterback, Alabama quarterback, Oregon quarterback, Indiana quarterback, juggernauts in college football. Right now, my front runner would be Carson Beck. And if we want to compare stats and passing yards, we can do that all day long because Carson Beck I don't even think he's top 30 in passing yards in college football this year. I think it's kind of a dangerous thing to do to compare that through 6 weeks of the season, because some teams have buys early in the season and some don't. And some can rack up a bunch of yards against cupcakes before they get into the grind of conference play. Whereas, Miami played legitimate non-conference opponents early in the season. So I'm not looking at the stats. I am just looking at who Carson Beck has beaten so far. I think Miami has the most impressive resume in college football right now. If I had an AP vote, I would vote Miami as the number 1 team in the country. Ohio State number 1 right now, but their best win of the season comes against Texas, and that win doesn't look very good at this point now that Texas is unranked. Oregon's big win against Penn State, that team's unranked too. So those wins don't look nearly as good now as they did at the time. Miami, though, got a neutral site win over Notre Dame. South Florida was red freaking hot when they came into Coral Gables. Miami beat them handedly. Miami beats Florida. And I know Florida's not necessarily a world beater at this point, but that's a rivalry game. That's an SEC team. That's a Power 4 non-conference opponent. Then they go into Florida State, a top 25 team that took down the big bad Alabama Crimson Tide in week 1. And Carson Beck looked great against Florida State. So I think right now, just with the resume and the wins that they have on their schedule, I have to give the edge to Carson Beck. Another thing, though, Fitz, that I think is important when we talk about awards that come from voters is who has played in prime time slots. Who can people watch? Like, if you can't vote for a guy if you're not watching him on TV. Carson Beck has played in a lot of primetime slots, whereas some of these West Coast quarterbacks get buried behind, 10:30 start times. So I would give the edge to Carson Beck right now for what Miami has accomplished so far.
So I hear all of that, and it's a really well laid out argument. Carson Beck would be my number 2. I would give the edge to Dante Moore. You see the numbers there. Again, they're very comparable. And the one thing I'll push back on is some of that schedule conversation, because while Penn State lost inexcusably to UCLA, I believe by the end of the year, Penn State will be ranked. I believe by the end of the year, Florida State will not. So Florida State had a really good beginning of the year that made all of us step back and say, whoa, wait a minute, maybe Florida State's legit. I just don't think they really are. So while I hear you that, certainly Florida is a rivalry game for Miami, and Florida playing better now today than they were in that game, particularly the one game that I'll say, yes, neutral field, Notre Dame, that feels like something. There's also week 1. Like, I'm genuinely not, for everybody that's going to take this and say I'm being a hater of everything. I'm not. I think one of the biggest issues we have this year in college football is that you can but all of the teams so far. I don't think we've really, if your argument is who have they played, I think you can pick apart that argument for almost everybody. So to me, Oregon going to Happy Valley to beat that team in that setting with that level of momentum on it, I think still has meaning. And then I look at what's coming up next. Oregon's going to get Indiana. That's another top 10 team. I think that's a game that they win handily, frankly. That's another sort of point here. The Big Ten championship game will be another point. I'm going to presume Oregon goes there. I think Oregon's headed to an undefeated season. I think Oregon's headed to a Big Ten championship game. When I talk right now about who the Heisman favorite is, I not only have to look at who they played, I have to look at what I think is ahead for them. And I think there's just enough resume points and just enough Heisman opportunities for Dante Moore to really separate. I'm with you. If I had an AP vote, I would be very torn right now between Miami and Oregon as my number 1 vote. No disrespect to Ohio State, truly. I just think that what's left ahead gives Oregon a little bit more runway for Dante.
That's the key looking forward ahead to the rest of the schedule, because a schedule can work for you and it can work against you. Or at least an easy schedule can work for you or against you. Like you just laid out, Oregon has several top 25 teams, at least at this point right now, coming up on their schedule. Miami has Louisville, Stanford, SMU, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. That is not necessarily a gauntlet. That doesn't give you a whole lot of opportunities to make statement plays, to get statement wins against big time teams. Now, if Miami takes care of business, because right now where it stands, they should be favored against every single team on the rest of their schedule. If Miami wins out, they go 12-0 and they win the ACC, well then yes, absolutely. It's a very fair case for Carson Beck in and of itself of being the quarterback of one of the best teams in the country. But if you slip up against Virginia Tech, a team that just fired their coach, if you slip up against a non-ranked team, well, that's a huge, huge, huge kind of demerit in your Heisman resume. Whereas if Oregon slips up against a top 15 team, a top 10 Indiana team, well, that's a little bit more forgivable, losing or not looking your best against a top 10 team. I think we have to also remember recency bias is a real thing. Who you play in November matters maybe even more than who you play in September. So beating Virginia Tech and NC State, I don't think will be as dazzling to Heisman voters for Carson Beck versus a Dante Moore or a Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss or a Fernando Mendoza at Indiana, maybe making more statement wins against who we view as more of the blue bloods in college football versus how we view Indiana.
So let's take a look, knowing that we've picked these two, at some blind resumes and see how we feel about some of the guys that we've selected versus other players that are out there. In this first blind resume, 5-0, 1,313 yards, 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 80% completion. Who do you think that is?
Is that Fernando Mendoza? No, it's not. No, it's not, because he only has 1 pick.
But the 5-0 record, 5-0 record throws me. I would have guessed Mendoza. Mendoza would have been my first and foremost guess on that.
This says yards. Is it passing yards or yards total? Because 5-0 record might be Trinidad Chambliss.
Let's see who it is. We're stuck. We'll see if we can figure out who this one is. And
Julian Sayin.
Julian Sayin. Oh man, Ohio State fans are going to murder us for not immediately going to Julian Sayin on that. Those are staggeringly impressive numbers. 13 touchdowns, 3 picks. Yeah, that's great. I'm still waiting for Ohio State to play a bunch of teams. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for Julian Sayin down the road to make his case. This is where
the quality of opponents, I think, comes into play here. Because, look, Ohio State gets credit for playing Texas week 1, the number 1 team in the country then. But, you have the Ohios and the Gramblings and the Minnesotas of the world. It's a lot easier to overlook a guy that hasn't made statements against big-time teams.
Let's take a look at another blind resume here. Let's see. A Heisman hopeful, 4-1 record, 1478, 13 touchdowns, 1 pick. This is Mendoza, right?
This is Mendoza.
70% completion, 1 interception.
No.
Oh, wait. All right, so is it Ty Simpson? Yeah, it's Ty.
Ty Simpson.
There we go.
That was
plus 800.
Pretty crazy. When they went in and played Vanderbilt this past weekend, I didn't realize that Ty Simpson had yet to throw an interception all season long.
That is a crazy stat. There's no doubt about it. All right, let's get the next one up. Let's see see if we can. We're 0 for 2 so far. 5-0. Oh, that should have been.
Okay, this is Mendoza.
That should have been our win-loss record. Should have been a good indicator for us on that one. Yeah, Mendoza here, 5-0.
We're just gonna keep guessing Mendoza. Yay!
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't believe. Yeah, we assigned Indiana a loss they didn't have on the last one. That's
73% completion and 16 touchdowns to 1 pick is crazy.
Yeah, that's again for somebody that is quickly rising up draft boards. A month ago it was Mendoza could be the first overall pick. You've got to be kidding me. And now it's like, oh yeah, Mendoza could be the first overall pick. You're not kidding. That just feels like
I do wonder if it's like a 5-0 record and 16 touchdowns, 1 interception, 73% completion. Like those are staggering numbers in a positive way. If he wore a different uniform, if he was Alabama's starting quarterback with those numbers, what do you think his Heisman odds would be?
Oh man, if he was Alabama quarterback, he'd be the favorite at this point, right? I mean, 5-0,
You would have
12-0-8,
to think
16-1.
so.
Yeah, 100%. But also, I mean, Indiana football will have the opportunity. Look, you say it all the time. Prove me wrong. Indiana, you will start to garner respect. You go in and you win this weekend. Mendoza balls out and you win this weekend. Then Indiana's going to get endless respect. I still apologize for giving you a loss that you didn't have. Let's get the next one up. See how we are on the next blind resume as we get 5-0 record, 1,033 yards, a 64% completion, undefeated. Who you think?
This leads me to believe it's Trinidad Chambliss because he does a lot with his legs. So he doesn't have as, pop off the page passing stats, and Ole Miss is undefeated.
Yeah, I'll grab that. Ole Miss is undefeated. I think that feels right.
Yay!
We're on a roll now. We are
Let's
suddenly
go.
on a roll. I mean, again,
Let's
plus
go.
1,800, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think that's where numbers get tricky, right? 5 touchdowns, 1 interception is not nearly as impressive as what we saw from some of the other touchdown interception ratios. But when you talk about Ole Miss, you're talking about a team that I think a lot of people casually right now, when they see the rankings and see what Ole Miss is number 4, I think people will sort of roll their eyes to that. There's nothing to roll your eyes to here. This Ole Miss team. You want to talk about quality wins? Ole Miss is one of the few teams in the country that has one that is undoubtedly a quality win right now.
And let's not forget, Trinidad Chambliss was not the starting quarterback coming into this season. It was Austin Simmons' team. And Austin Simmons got a little bit banged up. Trinidad Chambliss comes in and he hasn't lost the job because he has been so menacing with his legs, really. He's an incredibly difficult quarterback to contain, and they just keep winning. So given that he hasn't been the starter this entire season, yes, of course, his stats are going to look a little bit different than some of these guys that have been starting since week 1.
All right, so let's get one more blind resume in and see where we are on this one. I will let you take this, my friend. I know you know who this is. 5-0, 103 carries, 730 yards, 9 touchdowns, 7.1 yards per carry. Running backs need love too, Caroline.
Running backs need love too. Run the damn ball, and you don't feel more confident stepping in anywhere than if you have a running back like Ahmad Hardy can carry the rock. This is Ahmad Hardy at Missouri. Look, it's not very often that you get non-quarterbacks in the Heisman discussion. We've seen some receivers, some defensive players, but this is the renaissance of the running back position. We saw it with Cam Scadaboo and Ashton Genty last year. Ahmad Hardy is the kind of guy that has the same caliber, I think, as those two guys that we saw in college football last year. They play Alabama this weekend. Alabama cannot stop the run, so I think that he's going to put himself on the map this weekend. I love Ahmad Hardy. He's a blast to watch.
If you think there's even a remote chance, this is a good pizza bet at plus 3,300. Put $5 on it and just see what happens, especially before the Bama game. Because if he goes out and rushes for 200 against Bama, which by the way he could,
he might.
Like if he goes out and just crushes Bama, that number is going to go way up. So now that we've seen all the blind resumes across the board, we started this by you were squarely on Carson Beck. I'm squarely on Dante Moore. We've seen all the resumes. I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe I'm underselling Julian saying acknowledging that Ohio State hasn't necessarily played a gauntlet so far. But, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. When we start to look at what's ahead of Ohio State, there's plenty of opportunity for them in the coming – they've got Illinois this weekend. They will still have Penn – I think Penn State by then will also be a little bit reclaimed from where they are. They have Michigan left on the schedule, top 15 team, and then likely the Big Ten championship game. They do have points here. Could Julian Sayin work his way up your board?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And look, my pick Carson Beck today, your pick Dante Moore today. This is not who I'm saying I think will ultimately hoist the trophy in December, and that nothing that happens throughout the rest of the season will make me change my mind. Of course not. That's silly. That's ridiculous. Of course Julian Sayin can work his way up our board because he's going to have plenty of opportunity in primetime games against ranked teams, against legitimate Big Ten opponents to continue to rise up the ranks. So any of these guys, look, if Fernando Mendoza can Indiana has Oregon in a couple of weeks or this weekend, whenever it is. I got a lot of schedules in my head. If Fernando Mendoza can take down Oregon, then absolutely Fernando Mendoza skyrockets up the board. Absolutely, Amada Hardy or a Jeremiah Smith or, a Reuben Bain at Miami, a defensive end. Absolutely, they can continue to skyrocket the board. What matters is the wins that you get, the flashy stats that you continue to pile up, and Heisman moments. We're waiting for some of these Heisman moments to really kind of stand out. We haven't had, I don't think, one of those marquee Heisman viral moments quite yet.
I think Heisman moments is such a huge part of this conversation because that's why we continually lean on quarterbacks for really good teams. Like part of the reason that I don't know that I trust ties. I don't know that I trust Alabama is going to end up in the college football playoff. So if they're left on the outside looking in, I will use this very early in my platform that we will talk about repeatedly over the course of the year to remind everybody that the Heisman Trophy voting should be pushed back to January, and we should have the entirety of the college football playoff to at least provide opportunity for like candidates to get more proof of concept. I always think it's weird that they're going to hand out the Heisman and then we'll get the college football playoff. And you could have a situation where the quarterback that won the Heisman loses to a quarterback that was second in the Heisman race. It's just a bad look. It's bad optics. Move the award. All right. We'll keep breaking it down for you. But in the meantime, we got the Heisman months from now. We have the WNBA Game 3 tonight, Aces versus Mercury. Will it actually become a series? We'll figure it out next. On the road again. We've got the WNBA Game 3, Game 4 on the road for the Vegas Aces as the series moves to Phoenix tonight. Game 3, the all-important Game 3 with the Vegas Aces up 2-0. The question is, can it become a series? And this is where, Caroline, no team has ever come back from down 0-2 in the WNBA Finals. That's the big thing that everybody will keep telling you. I will remind everybody that we're best of 7 now, not best of 5. I think that makes a staggering difference in that stat. Totally. But at the end of the day, 2-0. For years, we've all said it at every other, for Major League Baseball, for the NHL, for every playoff. It's not a series until somebody loses at home, right? So I guess the question is, tonight, can Phoenix keep it a series?
So we've got 2 games in Phoenix. And if you think that this can be a series, a legitimate back and forth game, 6 to 7 game series, then you believe that Phoenix can take both games at home. I don't believe that. I do think that Phoenix will take 1 game at home. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Phoenix takes this game tonight, just with the momentum of, okay, We're back at home. This is a team that's been incredibly scrappy in the postseason, that they could be down double digits. They trailed by 16 to Nafisa Collier and the Minnesota Lynx in the last round of the WNBA postseason, and they came back to win it in overtime. Like, they've had so many comeback wins. When their backs were against the wall, they were able to find a way. And Alyssa Thomas, their leader, one big part of their big three, told me that's the position that they love to be in. They love to get that kind of momentum, to never feel like they can be counted out, that even if they're down 20 at halftime, they can scratch and claw their way back. So that is the mentality of this team, the chip on their shoulder, the grittiness. So I do think that being down 2-0 maybe wouldn't do as much mentally to this team as maybe it could a team that's as inexperienced as this one. Just because Alyssa Thomas does have so much postseason experience away from Phoenix, but she's been here before. I wouldn't be surprised if Phoenix takes this game tonight. But I think that the Aces mindset is incredibly dangerous. They have won 2 of the last 3 championships for a reason. They have a championship mindset. They hold each other accountable. They have the depth. It's not just the MVP right there in A'ja Wilson. It's Dana Evans. It's Chelsea Gray. It's Jackie Young that can provide supplementary rebounding and supplementary scoring off the bench. So while I do think Phoenix can take at least one game, wouldn't be surprised if it was tonight. I think that Vegas is going to be able to take at least one game on the road, and coming back to Vegas, that's dangerous. Up 3-1. All it takes is one win at home to take the series. So I don't think this ultimately will be a 6 or 7 game series, but hey, Phoenix proved me wrong.
I think the other part of this that's a big part of it is the scheduling. So remember that when this series started, there'd been a couple extra days off for Phoenix. They'd gotten a little bit extra rest. The Aces went all the way with Indiana in what was a particularly physical Game 5 that we talked about at the time, when overtime had to loop around, and on shorter rest, they had to start this series. And I felt like in Game 1 particularly, you could see a little bit of that. You had a little bit more pop in the legs of Phoenix, and Vegas still held out and won. Where I think that becomes substantial is look at the way the schedule plays out. The last game in this series was on Sunday afternoon. Well, now you got an extra day. They've been going every other day. They got an extra day. So they got Monday, Tuesday, and now they're in tonight. So you've given Vegas an extra day on light travel to get from Vegas from Phoenix. Obviously, that's an easy path for both of these teams. They get an extra day of freshness in their legs to come into this series with a killer instinct and knowing exactly what's on the line. Everybody that's playing for Vegas right now understands what advantage they have if they go up 3-0. What an opportunity it is to really put the series away. I'm with you. I think Phoenix probably wins a game in this series. I just think it's Game 4. I think what you're going to get tonight is the best of a rested Aces with a fire in their belly, knowing that they have the opportunity to essentially put this series away. And then in the next game, you've got backs against the wall, the usual things we see in a Game 4. But to me, it's a little about everybody else and a lot about A'ja. You're right. Everybody else on that roster contributes so importantly, but the intensity, the tone, the just the fire that they play with, that picture you see right there, that epitomizes sort of the rage that, in a good way, Vegas plays so much with stylistically. They've had an extra day to bring that. I just feel like we're going to get a different level from Vegas. And let's keep in mind, even in a 13-point win in the last game, there were times that game was close. I don't think Vegas has put together 4 great quarters in the finals yet, and they're still up 2-0.
Yeah, and that's incredibly dangerous to know what their ceiling can be, and how we probably haven't seen that quite yet in this final series. And when it comes down to these series and championships, you have to ask yourself, okay, the coach that you trust more, the superstar that you trust more, and the supplementary scoring that you trust more. Well, looking at the coaching matchup, Nate Tibbetts in Phoenix in his second year versus Becky Hammon, who is widely viewed as one of the best, if not the best coaches in the WNBA. Well, I have to give an overwhelming advantage to Becky Hammon. Let's look at these superstars. A'ja Wilson, the league MVP, versus Alyssa Thomas, who is also a legitimate superstar. That she was an MVP she had an MVP caliber season. She is a walking triple-double. But I still have to give the edge, I think, to A'ja Wilson, her scoring ability, her rebounding. And look, that is zero disrespect whatsoever to Alyssa Thomas, but I would give a slight edge to the Vegas Aces and their superstar. Now, supplementary scoring, I think, can be tricky here. And I think that ultimately, if you're going to look at these series where the margin for error or the difference is so razor thin, you look at the Mercury bench that has been very, very reliable in the postseason. Sammy Whitcomb, a certified veteran who has hit some clutch shots in the postseason. Dewana Bonner, who isn't going to be a big part, I think, for the first 3 quarters, but can step up big time in crunch time. A majority of her points in the postseason have come late in games. Like, those are veterans who have seen a lot of basketball that you really can rely on. Then you add in the rest of the big 3, along with Alyssa Thomas, Kalia Copper and Satu Sably. They've got the size and the scoring ability, but overall, I look at Chelsea Gray, I look at Jackie Young, I look at Jewel Lloyd and Dana Evans, the amount of electricity that they can bring off the bench, that they have brought off the bench in this series. I think it's kind of equal there. Like, I look at the supporting cast around these 2 superstars, and it's kind of a pick'em. So overall, with the pick'em on your bench, the pick'em in supplementary scoring, overwhelming advantage at head coach, the advantage that I give the league MVP. Overall, the Vegas Aces are just so easy to trust. And then you add on top of the experience. It's hard to count them out in the series. It's hard to think that Phoenix can scratch and claw their way out of a 2-game deficit, Fitzy.
In some ways, the Aces this season, over the course of the year, remind me a little bit of what we've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs at times, where, there was a point in this season where the conversation was the Aces are broken. And I think what we remember and what we find out is that the Aces, much like Kansas City, know when to turn it on. They know when to find another gear. And that resulted in a historic win streak this year, 17 games. That's resulted in a playoff run where, when their intensity has tried to be matched, they've found another level. Really, to oversimplify, the way you beat the Aces as they're currently constructed in this series, Caroline, is you hope that the Aces come out and have a night where they're just not really quite in it. And I just don't believe at this late stage that's going to be the case. And it's crazy because, as you just, I think, really accurately laid out, this is a very good Phoenix Mercury team. It's just they're going up against a modern dynasty. And I cannot say it enough. The Aces are constructed in a way that, could make the WNBA boring because they could just win it every single year. And we thought Kelsey Plum moving on might be, a crack in the armor. That hasn't turned out to be the case. It is truly, we have A'ja. We have the best player in the world. We're going to surround A'ja with some of the best players in the world that play their roles really well. And we're going to rely on our depth and our coaching. And it works. Like, it's just tough to beat this team.
And look, you use the D word, dynasty. This is the Aces' 3rd trip to the finals in 4 years. I understand that the WNBA is not for everybody. It's not everybody's favorite sport. And I would never, say that it would need to be. But just for sports fans, I'm not a European soccer fan, all right? There's not really going to be much that's going to change that. If you're a sports fan, you want to watch this series because we are currently witnessing greatness. We are watching a certified dynasty unfold in front of our eyes. We are currently watching someone who belongs on the Mount Rushmore of the WNBA in A'ja Wilson. She is a superstar. So I get it if the W isn't your favorite sport, it's okay. But if you're just a sports fan, an appreciator of watching greatness unfold, watch this series. Because I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, and you're going to be glad that you got to participate in history.
It's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. It just happens to be Becky Hammon and A'ja Wilson, 2 Hall of Famers. All right, we'll bring on a Hall of Famer with us next, at least a Hall of Famer in our mind. Our teammate going to come on with us, Andy Staples. We'll get his thoughts on the absolute dumpster fire known as North Carolina football and everything else going on in college football right now. 23 seasons. LeBron and Kenan Thompson, that from Law Murray, who, friend of the show, tweets out a reminder that LeBron has been in the NBA as long as Kenan has been on Saturday Night Live. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz at Yahoo Sports Daily. Let's just make sure everybody's fully aware out of the gates. We are an SNL show. All right. We are SNL fans on this show. My right arm is a tattoo of everywhere I've lived in the moments I'm proudest of. SNL is on that tattoo from when I sat in with the band. SNL is hits different for us. So we're going to bring up, Caroline, the tail of the tape here. Ready for this? Season number 23, LeBron v. Kenan. All right. So you got Akron versus Columbus, both Ohio. You got 4 titles, 4 MVPs versus 7 Emmys. You got the movie credits, Trainwreck and Space Jam 2, Kenan and Kel, Good Burger, and then the GOAT competition. So where are we? Tail of the tape, LeBron versus Kenan. Who's better?
Some might argue that it is harder to be around Saturday Night Live for 23 seasons than it is the NBA. You get paid a lot more to be in the NBA. Hey, you get to, you bounce a ball, you run around. That's not that hard. Putting on different wigs, reading lines, doing this every Saturday night, not getting paid $50 million a year. I mean, I think it's fair to say, Fitz, Kenan Thompson's been grinding more than LeBron James has. I'm kidding. Just for everybody at home. Okay. All right. Everybody calm down. But it's true. We can squarely put them both in the GOAT conversation because lasting 23 years in anything is very, very astonishing.
Oh, but there's a separator here. Trainwreck was an incredible movie. Space Jam 2, I don't care about. The original Space Jam sucked. I had no interest in Space Jam 2. Trainwreck was a great movie. Kenan and Kel and Good Burger were terrible movies. I'm just
Good Burger's a fantastic movie, Fitz.
Good Burger is a terrible movie. Kenan and Kel was a fine show. Good Burger, terrible movie. There's no way. There's no way that you liked. No, I refuse to.
This, I think, though, it matters how old you were at the time. Because Good Burger came out, let me look it up right now. When did Good Burger come out? It was released in 1997. Okay, that was the year that I was born. So, when I'm 8 or 9 years old and I think that fart humor is funny, that I would love Good Burger. We could watch Good Burger. Grew up watching all that on Nickelodeon, the silly potty humor. I ate it up. But I feel like if I watched Good Burger now, or I watched all that now, I wouldn't like it as much. It wouldn't hit as hard because the potty humor isn't as funny to me in my late 20s as it was when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Look, I love a good juvenile movie. I really do. But to your point, when those movies came out, you were born, I was 20, right? So there's just this moment of Good Burger was never going to hit me in my early 20s as a great movie. It just wasn't meant to be, right? So, but Trainwreck, I mean, I'll give John Cena a lot of credit for Trainwreck too. Trainwreck, the first time I watched it on a plane. And I was laughing so hard that the entire plane was staring at me. I was belly laughing on an airplane.
It is a funny movie.
It's hysterical. It's hysterical. Okay, but what about goats? Because here's the thing. The GOAT argument is the grown-up equivalent of my dad can beat up your dad. It's impossible to prove. Yeah. And I think it's perfectly okay for somebody to accept that LeBron can be a GOAT and Michael can be a GOAT. I happen to think that LeBron's probably the GOAT, but I don't really care enough one way or the other to fight with anybody. I will fight with somebody that tries to tell me Kenan Thompson is the GOAT for SNL. Being there the longest time does not, good sir, make you the greatest of all time. It just makes you the longest tenured. There's no way I'm putting Kenan in the GOAT conversation of SNL around people like Dana Carvey or Phil Hartman or Will Ferrell you see on the graphic or Goat Boy, who I dressed up as for one party. All of those
literal
things.
GOAT.
Literal GOAT. We haven't even gotten to the
boy.
originals, the OGs, Chevy Chase. I'm old. I'm just going straight into old stuff.
But and those are the GOATs of SNL. Look, and if you believe that LeBron James is the GOAT, great. I'm not going to argue with you. I would say it's Michael Jordan, but it's not something that I feel passionate enough to discuss or debate. It's LeBron and it's Michael Jordan, and how lucky are we to have had two players in the span of a lifetime that can be considered the greatest of all time. Kenan, I will say to your point, Kenan is a mainstay in SNL. It's so wonderful that one of my favorite shows of all time that I've been watching it ever since I can remember, that he has been around it for as long as I can remember, right? But he's not the funniest person on the show. Never has been. He would be the first person to tell you that. He's not the funniest person on the show, but he's a great actor. He gives great reactions. He's been a part of so many legendary skits, but it is, if you want to say Jimmy Fallon, Amy Poehler, Kristen Wiig, Jason Sudeikis, Will Ferrell, Eddie Murphy, so many great ones. Norm Macdonald, A Weekend Update, GOAT, so many great ones that have been the center of iconic sketches. They themselves are such iconic comedians. Kenan Thompson hasn't been that for the show. Doesn't mean that I don't love him, doesn't mean that he's not iconic. He just doesn't do for the show what so many others have. He's a GOAT because he's been there around a long time and everybody loves him. How do you not love Kenan Thompson?
He's Big Shot Bob. He's Robert Horry. He's on a bunch of championship teams and he has championship moments. But when we think of the greatest of all time, we don't actually put Horry in that conversation. And Kenan, certainly longevity matters. But as you mentioned, and Kenan has said in several interviews that he considers himself an actor, not a comedian, and so he's not a stand-up comic that suddenly came into this. He's a really funny actor that does a great job reading funny lines. Like the ability to last 23 years at anything, though, that is some level of impact conversation. And I will say for both of them, like I've said on this show, we deserve a LeBron, farewell tour. We deserve that. I will say loudly, Lauren Michaels, we deserve a Kenan farewell tour. Whenever he decides, because usually what SNL does is at the end, SNL's like last episode and there's a heartfelt farewell and it's like, oh man, everybody cries. Like, you're not going to see him again. No, not for Kenan. Kenan's been around so long that people that watched him in season 1 are now out in bars watching him in season 23, right? Like when your first fans that were born the day that you started are drinking, you deserve a farewell tour. SNL needs to do something different here. And whenever Kenan decides he's done, they need to make sure every week we get a Kenan moment until the very end. Not because he's the best, but because he's just been a fixture for 23 years.
And I think he's one of those cast members that, maybe he doesn't stick out week in and week out, but the day that Kenan Thompson decides to step away from SNL, you'll notice that he's gone. Maybe you don't notice he's there, but you will notice that he's gone because he's been such a big and just wonderful and lovely and jovial presence every single week. Just let the record show. I don't think I've missed an episode of SNL in years. Even college football season, when I'm, up late watching Pac-12 after dark that doesn't exist anymore, but it still does in my heart. Now I'm watching SNL on Sunday morning. So I feel like I am appropriately equipped to have that take. That we may not notice him every night, but we will notice him when he's gone. We will notice the absence.
I will also remind the world, when you pull up the tail of the tape again, 4 titles, 4 MVPs. LeBron has become such an institution. Like one of the funniest things about LeBron to me in general, all joking aside, is that we've become so obsessed with trying to figure out what LeBron's legacy should be and whether or not he's the GOAT. Like people have become so obsessed with that one phrase that they refuse to actually enjoy what has been a wild ride. 23 years in the NBA, playing at such a high level and also being the face of the league. Whether you love or hate LeBron James, he has been and will be and is the face of the NBA. If you've never watched a second of basketball in your life and you live in America, you still know who LeBron James is. And for all of the conversation that we've had about whether or not he's better than Jordan, which, again, I think is the stupidest sports debate we have in all the world. Like, it is the dumbest. And so we've spent so much of this time worried about his legacy. And it's just funny to me because in 30 or 40 years, when there's another LeBron, when there's somebody out there that's dominating the NBA, the funny thing to me is that everybody that today is sitting here saying, oh, LeBron sucks, is going to be the same person sitting on their porch saying, oh, that kid's no good. I watched LeBron. I just wish we could shut it all down long enough to appreciate. Like, I don't care if LeBron wants to do a stupid Hennessy ad and make social media go wild for a day. Like, who cares? At the end of the day, 23 years of watching the face of the NBA for somebody that's never been in the news for the wrong reasons, never given people objectionably a personal reason to root against him. They're just whatever you think of LeBron, I don't understand why, for the better part of most of his career, the goal has been tear down a goat instead of watch one and appreciate it. It's the dumbest thing we do in sports.
I loved that ad, by the way. Expert marketing from Hennessy. Everybody was talking about it. The world was abuzz. That's when a marketing, ploy or marketing scheme hits. It was the same thing a few years ago when Snoop Dogg said he was going smokeless. And everyone freaked out that, Snoop Dogg's not smoking anymore. And it ended up being an ad for like a smokeless bonfire. Love that. Creative geniuses behind those marketing teams. But to your point, I do think, old adage, you don't know what you have until it's gone. That applies in sports. I think Tom Brady is a perfect example of that we spent so many years, so many fan bases hated Tom Brady. And look, I get it. If you're a Dolphins fan, if you're a Bills fan, if you're a, Indianapolis Colts fan for so long, Tom Brady stood in the way of you getting to the promised land. So I understand harboring some resentment for that man. But we spent so many years being over Tom Brady, hating Tom Brady, resenting the greatness of the New England Patriots, that when he retired, it was like, whoa, we forget what a life without Tom Brady is like in the NFL. Same thing with Nick Saban and college football. Look, I will say it. I'm an LSU fan. I hated Nick Saban for so many years, for leaving LSU, for being the reason that LSU missed out on the SEC championship for so many of those years. But when Nick Saban decided to retire, it was like, whoa, like I don't want to live in a college football world where Nick Saban isn't part of it. So don't make that mistake in, constantly clowning LeBron, saying LeBron, it's time to hang it up, time to give it up. He will hang it up and give it up when he's due and ready, but let's just enjoy greatness while we have it.
Yeah, get out of your mom's basement if you're going to tweet about LeBron, hanging up. Just get out of your mom's basement and touch some grass. All right, we will get to some college
He's
football.
He's still playing at a high level.
My God, yeah. The amount of players it would kill to have a LeBron stat line today. Old ass LeBron still absolutely crushing it. We'll get into some college football next on the show. Andy Staples going to join us. We'll figure out what's going on in North Carolina coming up next. Anybody have raw footage in a burner email account? You know where to find me. That based on the report that the season-long documentary with Hulu we were expecting regarding North Carolina football is not happening. Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports Daily. Andy raises a really good point there. Like, it's not happening means it's not getting released. But my God, it doesn't mean that nothing's been recorded. Like, obviously, they already agreed to cameras coming in the building. It would not surprise me at all if there's hundreds of hours of burner footage that we need, Caroline. Like that, somebody somewhere's got to find a way to leak that. Like, nothing in the world stays private anymore. Get it to us. It's what we really want. We want the unedited footage from what we're not being allowed to see. And Andy's going to join us now. Now, Andy, you put out the call to the Wild Wild West. Has anybody got you any footage yet? How do we do this, man?
Well, nobody's got me any footage yet. I actually used to work with somebody at that company, and so I know that they would probably get sued into oblivion if they did release any of it. So, but I would love to see it. I would just love to see it. The scene I want is when it dawns on them that they have completely messed this up, that they put together a Conference USA roster to try to compete in the ACC.
I look, just for the record, guys, the last scene in The Hangover where they come in with the camera and they're like, hey, we're going to watch it once and then we delete everything. That's what I want. Like, I don't
Oh,
get,
no,
like,
it's the first scene in The Hangover. Remember, the first scene is the groom calls Bradley Cooper and Bradley Cooper goes, he didn't say we messed up, but
that is amazing.
Yeah, I think that's how everyone's feeling. I just want to know what percentage of the footage is Jordan Hudson. Whether it's interviews or just Jordan Hudson raw footage, like surely it's a staggeringly high percentage, no?
So I imagine it was a higher percentage at first. And then, because remember, this probably all started getting filmed before we're not talking about this on CBS News. And I think after we're not talking about this, they probably realized we need to dial this back. Because I imagine it was initially envisioned by Jordan Hudson as a Jordan Hudson vehicle. And then after all that stuff happened, they're like, oh, no, never mind. We just make it about the football team. And then they're like, oh, no, the football team's bad. We can't make it about the football team either.
Yeah, I don't blame her. She's a business woman. But let's look ahead to the slate upcoming, Andy. Who deserves jail time for putting 2 of the 3 ranked-on-ranked matchups this weekend at noon in Ohio State and Illinois and Alabama, Mizzou?
Well, I mean, the Fox people have always done that, but the Alabama-Mizzou game, you look at the preseason expectations. Well, you had Auburn, Georgia, you had LSU, South Carolina, you had Florida, Texas A&M, and of course Red River. So Red River was always going to be at 3:30. That when they moved Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, they moved Red River to 3:30 Eastern. So it didn't leave a lot of open spots for that. So, and I, as a sports writer, do not mind noon games because I remember being a newspaper writer covering night games where you have to basically write 2 stories, one if the team you cover wins and one if the team you cover loses. And you don't get a whole lot of detail in because the deadline is at the gun. So listen, I love a good noon game. So I'm not going to complain about that one bit. But yeah, it's the Alabama-Missouri game is one of the most intriguing games of the week. And the sleepy 11 a.m. local kickoff actually, I think, adds to the intrigue.
I want noon games to be like, there's nothing worse to me than going through all of the hype of, watching game day and you're watching Big Noon. You got 2 screens on, the whole house is on just electric energy. And they're like, all right, coming up, Maryland and Minnesota. And you're like, oh,
that's exactly right. It was the biggest letdown. So for decades, you'd have they're at the site of the biggest game of the week. They are, everybody's going nuts. Corso puts the headgear on, and then all of a sudden you're in Champaign, Illinois, and it's Northwestern Illinois, and you can hear individual fans talking in the stands. Like, it is the biggest letdown. So Fox was ingenious for coming up with, hey, everybody else puts slop at noon, so let's put good games at noon. And then ESPN, when they realized, oh, we screwed this up, had to start counter-programming. And that's how you get what you get. Now, I'm not sure Ohio State, Illinois is going to be one of those great games. So it's more like Indiana, Oregon at 3:30. I wouldn't have minded that in prime time, but there's so much in prime time already. So at least if you're 2 screening it, you can go Indiana, Oregon, Texas, Oklahoma.
2 screening it and 4 boxing on both of those 2 screens if you really want to get freaky.
See, I think the real one's 2 screen, 2 games, 4 box on a screen down below, so 4 box on a laptop, and then you have your auxiliary game on an iPad or a phone down below.
It's minimum 4 screens.
Or you just get 5 TVs.
Yes, and every interior decorator in America started rolling their eyes at the thought of that. But some people might be rolling their eyes at the thought of Alabama-Missouri being a premier matchup of the weekend, but I don't think people realize how good of a football team Missouri has been. Ahmad Hardy looks like the best running back in America, and Bo Prabula is sneaky putting together a solid resume. How much worse do you think Penn State fans feel about James Franklin? Not just losing to UCLA, not just losing to Oregon, but how good Bo Prabula has looked at Missouri.
Oh, I think it is salt in the wound every single time. I think every time they turn on a Missouri game, they're like, wait, we could have had this? But the thing is, could you have had this? Because every Penn State quarterback since Trace McSorley's basically looked the same. So I'm not sure you could have had this. I think this is a philosophical thing at Penn State. That you notice once when Levis left Penn State, all of a sudden he was really good too. So I think that's something that Penn State needs to look inward and solve rather than say, oh, we could have had Bo Prabula. We chose, when Drew Aller said he was coming back, we told Bo, we love you, but you deserve a chance to start. And Bo went and found a place to start. But I think this is more of a look inward situation for Penn State. Like, why are all the non-Trace McSorley, who, by the way, had Saquon Barkley with him, quarterbacks, why do they not seem to live up to their potential? I think it's probably the offense. I think it's probably the philosophy. I don't think, and it's interesting because they've had different offensive coordinators. Andy Kotelnicki obviously is a very creative mind, or was at Kansas. But I think James Franklin needs to decide, do I want to have a dynamic offense or not? Because he's not coached like he wants to have a dynamic offense. He's wanted to have that great defense, be fairly conservative. Well, that's not always going to work. And sometimes you're going to get in a shootout and you're not capable and not equipped to play in one. And should they have been in a shootout against UCLA? No, but they were, and they weren't capable of it.
All right. What about Indiana, Oregon? What will it take for the winner of that to gain more respect?
Well, I think Oregon's got plenty of respect already. They're the number 1 seed in the playoff last year in the Big Ten champ. So I don't think anybody disrespects Oregon. This is a chance for Indiana to legitimize itself, because people look at last year and say, okay, the one time you had a chance to play somebody in the regular season was Ohio State. You got your doors blown off. Well, this is a similar type team on the road, similar situation. So I don't even think Indiana has to win. I just think Indiana has to make this interesting. I think if Indiana looks like they belong on the same field as Oregon, we're going to go, okay, that's probably 2 playoff teams playing. And I think Indiana is better than they were last year. And I'm excited to see this game because, when Indiana gets it going and when Indiana's running the ball effectively, they're very hard to stop. And Iowa managed to slow them down, and that's what mucked up that game for Indiana. If Oregon can do that, then Oregon's in good shape. And this may be the most difficult regular season game left on Oregon's schedule.
We have Red River this weekend, quickly before we get you out of here. TBD if we'll see John Mateer if he's back from hand surgery. But what is wrong with Arch?
Well, part of it's nobody's really blocking for him. I mean, the 300-pound dude in your face every play does tend to have a deleterious effect on your ability to throw the ball. But
good word.
I think it's also he's sped up. He's not as poised in the pocket as we thought he was going to be. And, it may be that he needs more time, he needs more seasoning. But unfortunately, right now, you don't have more time. You're going to play the best pass rush in the country, maybe, and you'd better get this done. And honestly, if John Mateer finds a way to play, I don't know how Texas wins this game, because the pass rush they're going to face with Oklahoma is worse than the one Florida gave them last week. And Florida looked really good against them. I would worry about that. If Michael Hawkins is starting for Oklahoma, I do worry about how Oklahoma scores. If Mateer's playing, I don't worry about that anymore. So Texas had better play its best game of the season, and that offensive line, which is not really blocked for Arch yet, better figure out a way to do it.
You guys can check him out on College Football Enquirer. Andy, always appreciate your time, my friend. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. Going to be a fun weekend.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Andy
Andy.
Staples joining us. And Caroline, he wins MVP for the week because he used deleterious. Like, he just casually, flippantly used deleterious. Just like, boom. He used it in a way that you know he uses it all the time in conversation, which just makes him even smarter.
It rolled off the tongue. And
Right.
how did we not think to make that the word of the day?
Oh, deleterious
Doofus?
would be that's like
Deleterious
we
would
could
be a
the,
lovely word of the day for October 8th. It
you know
gives
what?
big
We'll-
October
we'll-
8th vibes.
We'll make it the word of the day tomorrow. Look, if he's right and Texas just doesn't have any shot at winning that game, by the way, man, Texas fans are going to lose their minds. Like, it's already a bad season. It gets even worse if this goes wrong.
This isn't a Sark's on the hot seat kind of game, but I think this will be the kind of uncomfortable conversations that the powers at Texas have to, powers that be at Texas have to have of some changes that might need to come in leadership on that team.
Well, we'll break it down throughout the rest of the week. We'll be back right here tomorrow at 9 a.m. on Yahoo Sports Daily. For Caroline Fenton, I'm Jason Fitz. We appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. Come back tomorrow. We'll do it again.